Welcome. You are entering our promised land, a world of pristine beauty and surprise, born of dreams and nightmares. But beware as you fly, for each of the falling totems you observe must be recaptured if you are ever to achieve the complete experience of our world. Beware that as you enter each of the artist's worlds seeking totems, you will encounter potential natural disasters and other challenges which, if triggered, must be solved. For it is only in harmony that you may possibly complete your task. If and when you are able to find all totems, you may just have come closer to learning the secret of your own promised land.
Welcome to Dreamscape Divided. I'm Phil Frost, and the animation that you just saw was the opening video for a game called Queensryche Promised Land, a game that I consider to be one of the weirdest games ever made, but also one of the most interesting games ever made. I have analyzed this game throughout my entire life. I played it first when I was 6 years old, and at least once a year, I either think about it or come back to it and play through it again, even though it's the same game with the same solution every time. So what exactly makes this game so interesting, and what exactly makes it so bizarre? I'm going to do a deep dive on all of that today, starting with what is Queensryche's Promised Land? Well, in order to get an answer, let's look in the game's official manual. Promised Land is a challenging, complex adventure game with 5 worlds. Promised Land features over 70 beautiful and diverse areas, over 100 minutes of video, and a haunting, ambient soundtrack. It is unlike any other game produced before, and also unlike any world you've ever explored. Most of what is said there, although a little exaggerated, is true. However, I do want to call out one part that I think is a little deceptive before we move on. It says this game is unlike any other game produced before. That is a blatant lie, because whoever worked on this game obviously took a lot of inspiration from the 1993 point-and-click adventure game, Myst. The inspiration is so obvious, it feels wrong to not only not say something about it, but actively say, no, this game isn't like that one, or any other game. I don't know about that one, Queensryche. Now, here's the question you might have. Who is Queensryche? Geoff Tate, Chris DeGarmo, Michael Wilton, Eddie Jackson, and Scott Rockenfield formed Queensryche over 12 years ago in Seattle after a number of years of playing in various combinations of different bands in the area. A professionally recorded 4-song demo tape caught EMI's attention in 1983 that later became Queensryche's self-titled debut EP. Since then, the band has released 5 full-length albums that range from the hard rock of The Warning to the more varied strains of one-of-a-kind concept albums like Operation Mindcrime, and the more recent Empire and Promised Land. Yes, that's right, Queensryche is a rock band who decided to make a point-and-click adventure game to coincide with their album by the same name. Hopefully now you're starting to understand why the fact that this game even exists is so interesting and bizarre. So that's Queensryche. That's the basic gist of the game. It is a point-and-click game in the style of something like Myst. But we need more details. What do you do in Promised Land? And what was that opening animation talking about? Well, if I read the back of the box that the game came in, we start to get some answers. Welcome to the mystical, provocative, and humorous game that explores the minds and emotions of the multi-platinum band Queensryche. Promised Land is set on a small island in the Pacific Northwest, where the line between fantasy and reality is constantly shifting. On the island, there are 5 fascinating worlds, in which you can do such things as explore a brain, sail upon a sparkling ocean, become a guest on a talk show, save the world from asteroids, or even abort a nuclear meltdown. During the opening animation for the game, you see the flying Queensryche Tri-Ryche totem pole scatter its 5 pieces over the game's island, and then crash into the darkness of the forest. You must find the 5 pieces of the totem pole to win the game. When you immerse yourself in Promised Land's 3-dimensional puzzles, games, and thought-provoking ecological challenges and find the totem pieces, you will be treated to a new Queensryche song the band recorded solely for this CD-ROM. Enter Promised Land. You may never want to leave. And you know what? They weren't wrong about that last part. There's a lot of games I played when I was 6 years old, and most of them I don't come back to on a yearly basis. This is different. This is bizarre in a way that my brain not only finds entertaining, but incredibly interesting and something to analyze on a deeper level. So, speaking of a deeper level, let's go into the game on a deeper level and talk about each of the 5 worlds that the manual referenced earlier. Each world represents a member of the band Queensryche, so let us start with the member Michael. Actually, you know what? Scratch that. Let's start with the forest. The forest is the first location that you're dropped when you enter the game Promised Land. You can navigate the forest by pointing in different directions and clicking where you want to go. The forest acts as a sort of hub that connects all of the worlds of the game. All 5 artist worlds are on the outskirts of this main weird forest. Why is the forest weird? Well, the foliage moves in ways that don't make sense. The leaves, rather than swaying in the wind, will sort of do like 360 spins or grow and shrink in size. It's very off-putting. And that's sort of a good descriptor for the entire game, I'd say. And that's part of what makes it so intriguing to me. Now, the forest itself doesn't really have any value aside from being the way that you get to all of the artist worlds. If you want to find the 5 totem pieces, you're going to have to navigate to each of those 5 artist worlds and find 1 totem pole in each world. Upon finding the 5th piece, you are flown to a spiritual place in the forest where the totem pole has been rebuilt. There, the band will greet you and play the bonus track that you're after. Now we're ready to go into Michael's world. If you head directly west, the forest begins to thin, then die. You see a lone obelisk, Michael's world, off in the distance, far from the forest up on a hill. As you approach, you are offered the choice to browse the world or explore a deeper understanding of life. Either way, as you go deeper and deeper into the obelisk, you discover a series of increasingly complex puzzles that reward you at each juncture with an unfolding sequence of bizarre locations unlike anything you've ever imagined. There's only one way out, through life's deeper meanings and the hazy mist of your inner mind. That's how the manual itself describes Michael's world. In a more simple description, it's just a big old temple with an obelisk on it sitting in an empty field. One thing that I think is interesting about Michael's world is that almost all of the stuff you'll find in it is inside of the temple. And this aligns with what the manual describes as Michael's value. According to the manual, every member of Queensryche has a core value that is very important to them and that you need to live by in order to succeed at their section of the game. Michael is the guitarist for Queensryche, and he suggests that you have everything you need inside. If you don't go inside, far inside, you won't go very far. This would suggest that in order to succeed at getting the totem in his world, you'll need to enter the temple. That assumption is technically correct. However, ironically, it's a lot easier to get the totem piece if you ignore the inside of Michael's temple entirely. But I'll come back to that. Let's enter Michael's temple and see what he has stored in this sacred place that he so desperately wants you to enter. One of the first things that I always notice when I enter his temple is just how incredibly ominous everything is. It's an almost pitch black hallway There are lights, we can see them on the ceiling, but they're not giving off much light at all. And some of the light that is present is red. This place just gives you the vibe that you're not supposed to be here. Or maybe you are, but it's not a safe space. Even the music in Michael's temple is extremely ominous and leaves you on edge the entire time you're here. And that will be a recurring theme throughout the entire game. The music always makes you feel like you're in imminent danger. If you go all the way to the back of his temple, you'll find a door, a big metal door that feels like the kind of door that you would lock something behind that you do not want to get out. What's in there? Well, it's the underworld. It's fire and brimstone. It's devils. It's the nether from Minecraft. This is a recurring theme we're going to see throughout Michael's world, which is religious imagery, specifically Christian imagery. A lot of the areas within Michael's temple really do feel like a liminal space or a very abstract, surreal painting. This area, I think, reflects that very well. Look at these weird columns. Look at all the weird black and white symbols on the wall. The floor seems to have holes in it that go to who knows where. Navigating further into the temple, we find a strange room filled with sand and ice crystals. There's dinosaur fossils on the ground, and there appear to be like partially destroyed statues in some areas, though they're hard to see. And I think this relates to another one of the major themes of Michael's world, which is history. Here, you're presented with 3 books. One representing history, one representing science, and one representing religion. The only way to progress is to drag your mouse around all 3 of the books until you find something to click on, finally, in the religion book. If you click on the green dot in the center of the cross, you'll be taken to the next area. You also get to see Michael perform a guitar solo, which doesn't really affect the story in any way, but it does remind you that, hey, this game was made partially by a rock band, which is still wild to me. Why did they do this? I'm happy they did, but I'm confused why they did. Eventually, you'll make your way to this other ominous room filled with guitars. If you click on one of the guitars in the very center of the space, Michael will start just saying these weird, like, fake deep things to you. It's kind of hilarious, and it's not supposed to be.
Nuclear visionary, a synesthesiac perception, a hypodermic injection, a flawless reaction, a Prozac nation, a commerce configuration, a true idea, or just a rationalized thought, a solar appreciation, a trippy visualization, a universal explosion, a light-blinding motion, a fuse of power, a flash of surprise, a river of light flows through my mind.
And then, if you click on the guitar enough, he'll tell you to click on a brick.
Click on the brick.
So you do, and what do you find if not whatever this tunnel is? This gross tunnel. Why'd they make the tunnel so gross? One theory I have about this, though I can't really back up any of my theories because almost no information on this game exists, is that the reason this tunnel looks so organic and bodily is that they say your body is a temple. So I'm assuming that this temple in its entirety somehow represents Michael's body, or just more generally, a human body. And finally, the last room in the temple is this sort of destroyed space. It looks like some catastrophic event has happened here, and Michael appears in the center.
Don't forget that your visions will someday manifest themselves if you make them happen.
If you listen to everything Michael has to say, for whatever reason, you'll immediately be sent back to the underworld room from before. Huh. Interesting. Now, what about that totem piece? Well, before we get to how you get that by entering the temple, I have to tell you about another challenge that this game presents. Aside from finding the 5 totem pieces, it also gives you an extra optional challenge that you can do. These are known as ecological games. There is one ecological game per artist world, and according to the manual, the goal of each ecological game is to save an artist's world from an ecological disaster that you might unintentionally trigger. If any of the ecological games are triggered, they must be solved. Because if you fail and the world you are in is destroyed, you can no longer search for the totem piece that is hidden in that world. Now, what they don't explicitly tell you in the manual is that you can very easily reset a world after it's been destroyed just by going back to the forest, and then, yeah, everything's good. But it is scary the first time it happens. You're like, oh, did I just ruin my game? Now I have to start all over? No, it was just a minor inconvenience. So what kind of ecological game exists in Michael's world? Well, outside of his temple, there is this weird pole with a lightning bolt on it. If you click on it, the pole sends a bunch of orbs into space. You then see an animation of a satellite, which is receiving the orbs and is now going to do some sort of nefarious deed. You then get this ominous message on your screen. You have triggered the countdown to the destruction of the world's knowledge, unless you can display this very knowledge yourself. For the vertically challenged, go up the stairs and into the corridor. If you succeed, you will save the wisdom of the obelisk from oblivion. That's right, we're going back into the temple, and this time we get to enter a new room that was not able to be accessed before. We also have a timer in the top right-hand corner now, which shows how much time we have to fix the disaster that we have quote-unquote unintentionally triggered. The new room features some sort of electrical device and a bunch of weird-looking walls. But on one side is a computer, and this computer will present you with a word puzzle. You'll be given a word in the top right-hand corner, and you have to match that word to a very questionable description. Sometimes they make sense, other times they're a little bit too vague. But it's okay because this game is very forgiving. If you pick a wrong answer, all you have to do is go back and do all the previous questions again, then pick a new answer. If you successfully complete all of the questions in the time limit, the obelisk on top of Michael's temple will send a new signal up to the satellite, and that signal will cause the satellite to turn away, and now the world's knowledge is apparently saved. You also get a second little treat for doing this, because the moment you solve the puzzle and watch this animation, you're teleported to the very top of Michael's temple. At the top, you see 2 silver bowl-looking things, and in one, there's a tiny little piece of something. I wonder what that could be. It's a totem pole. That's the first one. All you have to do is click on it twice, and boom, it's yours. However, I do find its hiding spot a bit humorous, because not only is it on the outside of the temple, we did technically have to go inside to get here, but it's on the outside. And Michael's value was that you had everything you needed inside. Not true, at least for the context of this game. But what makes this even worse is that if you want to speedrun this game, which I have many times, you don't have to enter Michael's temple at all. You can go into this world, walk up the steps, and then instead of going in the temple, just walk up more steps, and get this, then leave. Which begs the question, why is Michael's value that everything you need is inside? That actively goes against the hiding spot, something that no other value in the manual does. It's just a weird inconsistency that really makes me wonder why they made the choices that they did. I don't know. Anyway, we spent way too much time talking about Michael's world. You're probably bored of this place. Let's go somewhere more interesting, perhaps. Let's go to Geoff's world. On any given day when he's not on tour or writing music, Geoff can be found on his boat. The world of Promised Land is no exception. A pier hugs the foggy southern coast of the island, next to which sits Geoff's boat. It waits to explore the glistening, though unfathomable, sea beyond. Travel Geoff's world, an ocean alive, a world teeming with waves, ice floes, and floating islands. Discover an entire undersea world, complete with a destroyed marine theme park, dedicated to the fish lost long ago. See the overwhelming reach of the drift net fishermen, whose living net you can still see off beneath the distant undersea horizon. A net you must try to cut. Such an action would undoubtedly make at least one ship's captain very, very angry. Just remember that once you start, you can never stop. All that stuff about the drift net is hinting at the ecological game of this world, something we'll get into later. But first, let's talk about Geoff himself. You can find Geoff in this world, but he's not out at sea, as that would suggest. He's in a very, very brown swamp. Geoff is the lead singer of Queensryche, and what he says here presents some interesting lore about this game, or at least Geoff's world itself. He says that the sea we're about to explore, was once land. So this, much like a lot of this game, feels like some environmental commentary. Geoff's world especially leans into this, specifically when it comes to the ocean, fish, and the ethics of certain fishing practices.
Perhaps you have found my totem piece by now, so deep beneath the sea that was once land. Remember, when it comes to the darkness of drift net fishing, cut your losses.
If you go to seek out Geoff's boat, you'll have to raise the sail, and then, once you step on board, Chris, another member of the band, will give Geoff a message.
Geoff, Chris here above you about 10 o'clock. Looks like we've got an orca trapped in the drift net mesh to your north. Why don't you find the buoy, jump in, and disconnect it from the net to give the orca some freedom? I'll look out for the trawler.
Once again, we're getting a reference to the drift nets and the drift net fishermen. They really want you to find these drift nets and cut them. So how do you do that? Well, once you start driving Geoff's boat, you'll find a map, and that map will show 5 buoys. These buoys are pretty far north on the sea. So if you sail to where those buoys should be and find one, you can walk out towards it on the water somehow and cut the drift nets one by one. There are 5 drift nets to cut and 5 buoys to go with them. All the while that you're cutting these drift nets, the drift net fisherman in his trawler is lurking ominously right behind you. But thankfully, unless you're too slow, he never catches up to you and doesn't do anything. If you are too slow, he'll just run over your dang boat. This man's crazy. But anyway, let's say you successfully cut all 5 drift nets. What happens then? Is it something like Michael's world where they teleport you near the totem location? Not quite. In a sort of weird, not so much reward ending, you're just teleported to a dark area of the ocean with a whirlpool directly behind you. If you try to sail away from it, you'll be sucked inside and end up in a black underworld abyss with a very ominous island out in the distance. This island contains what I think is one of 2 of the scariest entities in this game. Something that would both intrigue and frighten me when I was young. An entity that, according to the game files, is named Soul Man. If you speak to Soul Man, he has this message to say. This, the point and click game, might be a game, but all of the drift net fishing stuff, the atrocities that some fishing practices are causing, that's not a game. And Geoff himself really wants to make sure that you know that. Geoff cares about the environment and he thinks that everyone should too. Anyway, let's get to the totem now. How do you get Geoff's totem? Well, his is actually one of the easier ones to get. If you click on that map from earlier that showed the buoys, you'll find 2 islands pretty close to the place where your boat is initially parked. These islands are marked with a Q and an R for Queensryche. If you go to the island marked with an R, you'll find this strange wheel on a stick. This is a puzzle which I assume they intended to be kind of difficult, but what's funny is you can just ignore the puzzle entirely and just spam click on the top of these 3 rings, and it'll give you the totem. The goal of the puzzle, as it was designed, was to line up all of the little notches on these wheels, but apparently you can just do that by clicking the top one over and over until it works. But we're not done with Geoff's world quite yet, because while we have done the 2 activities of the world, the ecological game and the totem, there's one very interesting and extremely ominous location, even more ominous than the others, called Sealand, an obvious parody of Sea World, which brings up more ethical questions about the treatment of animals in a place like Sea World. Sea World is green and has some of the creepiest music I've ever heard. Dead fish, they're everywhere in this place. You can also, for whatever reason, find Geoff's brain down here. And you can enter a door in order to learn more about Geoff. I say learn more about Geoff, but really, you kind of just find some random stuff. I don't entirely know what it's getting at. You can pick up a hammer and click on some rusty nails, and when you do, various animal noises will play. You can do a little puzzle of Geoff's face, and if you complete the puzzle, Geoff will wink at you. I don't like that. And then you can find a phone book with nails stabbed into all the corners. If you try to open the phone book, Geoff will appear out of nowhere and sort of passive-aggressively compliment you for not looking through his phone book without his permission. And then he melts into the ground. There's nothing else to do in this room. Oh, except for open this chest and find a fish. Oh, and this brings me to Geoff's value, which is outlined in the manual. It says Geoff's value is the importance of trust. You must practice trust in order to make contact deep inside of his brain. Ironically, though this has nothing to do with the totem piece, once again, there's a bit of a contradiction here, because in order to make Geoff appear, you have to try to betray his trust by opening his phone book with nails in it. So they're 0 for 2 so far. At least this time they're not actively leading you away from the totem, but it's still bizarre. Anyway, that's it. You've seen enough of the ocean. Let's go to another land-based area. This time, we'll go to Scott's world. As you travel further north along the shore, you see a series of floating islands off the coast. Scott's world has been shattered by a comet, redirected by a flawed human experiment. Floating cities, drifting chunks of land, and airborne tennis courts occupy the horizon as far as you can see from the nearby psychedelic bluff in Scott's world. Comb the island, search for Scott's body, and find his spirit below the deep waters. Or scan the telescopic skies for music, if you wish. Just avoid the floating lab that took the world out of balance in the first place. If you don't, you better pray you've got a good ear. Yeah, so Scott's world is probably the most everywhere, all over the place world in the entire game. It honestly feels like a mini Promised Land within Promised Land. There's so many different islands, so many different sections of his world you can travel to, and they're all distinctly different. The main area that we care about in Scott's world, for the sake of the main game, is a city. A floating city that can only be accessed if you look at it through these weird orange binocular things. Once you go to the city, you'll have to walk straight forward, take a right, go all the way right, turn back around to face left, and then there will be one singular lamp that is lit. When we click on it, the world itself seems to dissolve into nothingness. And behind a bunch of red lines, you can see a very faint outline of a totem piece. If you click on it, you get it. And now we have 3 of the 5 pieces of the totem. Let's go, we're halfway there. But hold up, we can't leave Scott's world yet, we've barely seen anything. Remember what the opening little paragraph said about avoiding the floating lab? Let's do the opposite of that and go straight there. When you try to approach the place, the game reminds you that, hey, you're not supposed to go here.
Do not enter. To do so will return this world and yourself to great peril.
If you actively ignore the voice and go inside anyway, you'll be met with another ominous message, much like what we saw in Michael's world. It says the world's destruction was caused by a scientist's greed. It seems so simple to pull energy from a passing comet. Controlling such a phenomenon was, unfortunately, beyond their grasp. Now, out of tune, the invention calls the comet around again. Find the interface, then match each drum track with the corresponding counterpoint, and you may yet save this corner of our promised land. This is a drum puzzle because Scott is the drummer of the band. This is also by far the most difficult puzzle in the game. The main reason it's difficult is because it's just not very clear. You'll find this strange device that has 20 buttons on it. Some of them are blue, some of them are pink. You would think that means something. It doesn't. You're just trying to find which drum pattern on the right sounds most similar to the drum pattern on the left. However, sometimes the puzzle breaks and all of the buttons will turn black. Assuming this doesn't happen, you can do a whole lot of trial and error. There's a little brain on a screen on the top of this device, split into two hemispheres. Those two hemispheres will move closer to one another if you make a correct selection. You have to make 10 correct selections in order to get the brain to go back together. When you do, you'll be given a little cutscene that shows the comet passing by the lab, and the world is safe. Now let's talk about an interesting decision that Scott made with this world. Aside from the city and the floating lab, there are a bunch of other floating islands out in the distance, and if you click on them, you'll see Scott playing an extremely simple little drum beat with random objects. Here he's banging on some anvils. Over there, he's just slapping a tree. This one, he's banging on some trash cans. Oh, and one, he's not even playing the drums at all. One of them, he's just floating in a bubble while some weird... It's just weird music. I don't even know how to describe it. It sounds like this man he's transcended to another plane. And if you watch him play the drums and make music over and over and over, eventually you will be awarded with getting to watch them all again on top of each other. Which could be good, but it's admittedly not that great. It's what you would expect. It's all of the stuff you heard before, but this time they all play at the same time. Okay. Also, Scott's value. It says in the manual that Scott's value is the power of dreams. Follow your own dreams or keep dreaming. For Scott will be deeply involved with composing his next tune. This one also is a little bit contradictory, but not as much as the others. It says to keep dreaming, which in my mind means like, hey, reach for the stars, go crazy. But ironically, the scientist that wanted to go crazy by trying to control the comet doomed everyone. So I guess dream as long as you're not going to blow up the entire Earth in the process. That would have been a better value, but it probably wouldn't have sounded as nice. Okay, that's 3 worlds down, 3 totems, 3 games. Let's move on to our next world, Chris's world. Chris's world is a lighthouse, a tall, steady beacon along the ocean side, offered to those at sea, seeking a familiar solace as they cruise the sea of life. Chris's world is also a Zen paradox, a testament to the phrase less is more. Enter the lighthouse and discover the eye room. Experience the exuberance, the frustration, the beauty, and the confinement of being in the public eye. Examine Chris's world from another perspective and discover the familiar. You may just find what it is you're looking for, but beware of that which you don't understand. If you don't, you may be forced to look within as you bring disaster to your shores. That message, more so than any other message in the manual about an artist's world, is genuinely helpful when it comes to finding the totem. Chris's value, actually, for once, is helpful and doesn't contradict something in game. It says Chris's motto is less is more. Go for more and you'll have fun for a while, but you won't meet Chris. He's nowhere to be seen. You also won't find the totem, because you see, the only structure in Chris's world is this big old lighthouse. There's an area in the front of it you can enter, which is full of eyeballs and an answering machine and a creepy dummy in a closet. I'm pretty sure this entire room is just designed to show how Chris is not entirely comfortable with being in the public eye so much. And then there's a back room where you can warp through a mirror and go to some other place, but we're going to get to that later because that's a whole thing on its own. Let's talk about the less is more thing. So, big lighthouse. That's probably where you want to go if you're first playing this game. You see that thing, you're going straight for it. Don't do it. Examine Chris's world from another perspective and discover the familiar. What's the most familiar thing here? The most mundane, ordinary thing in Chris's world? A bunch of rocks. That's right, the totem is just hidden in some random rock. It also plays this ominous sound when you find it. That sound lives in my mind forever. Anyway, you can also find Chris by exploring the rocks. Chris emerges from a tide pool, and he tells you that a piece of driftwood may have washed up along the shore. That's another hint to just search the rocks for the totem, rather than going inside. My gosh, why is Chris's world by far the best at telling you what to do? So many of the other worlds actively avoid telling you what to do or lead you astray. Chris, he knows what's up. We love Chris. Chris is the other guitarist, in addition to Michael. He would soon leave the band a few years after this. Now that we've explored what makes Chris's world good, let's destroy it. Let's go back into that mirror place and flip this giant lever. Actually, before I get to that, I just want to say this because I keep forgetting to mention it. One creepy thing about this game, aside from its soundtrack, is that there are faces everywhere. There are so many dang faces. And not just like normal person faces. I'm talking demonic, warped faces. In the landscape, you turn and look at a rock, there's a demon. You turn and look at the ground, well, there's a weird face. You can't escape faces in this game. They're always watching. In fact, there's one part where you could just see a whole man on the ground. And then there's a part where you turn around and you see a dude run between two trees. This game really creates anxiety within you in a way that no other point and click game I can think of does. But yeah, the lever. Let's flip that now.
Hey, what's happening? Where are you, Lighthouse 4? This is SS Armageddon with 200,000 tons of crude. You've suddenly gone dark.
Yeah, flipping this lever shut off the entire lighthouse. You shut down the main power, and now there is a big boat with a bunch of crude oil on it about to crash into the rocky shore. Much like Geoff's world, you have created a real ocean-based problem. Now, you would think in order to restore the power, you would just flip the lever back up, right? Nah, that's too easy. you need to go back into the room that had the weird mirror in it and find a note. That note will have a bunch of different numbers on it. Most of this note is taken up by this weird diagram with blobs and triangles, and then there's codes off to the top left. If you look at the numbers that go along the triangles, only one of the codes up in the top left uses those numbers, and it's 1999-826. That's the puzzle. You just need to input 1999-826 into a control panel at the top of the lighthouse, and you're done. You save the day. But Chris is not very happy with you. He will appear in his lighthouse and ask if you just go around flipping random levers all the time. Technically, the answer to that is no, but I did press a red button in Scott's world and blow everything up. I think I'm gonna let that slide though, because that was a button. You know, that's technically not what he asked. And then he's gone. And once he vanishes, all you're left with is more creepy, ominous music, because you cannot escape the creepy, ominous music. And now let's get into the final world, Eddie's world. Eddie's world occupies a slightly twisted area of the forest. Head into the forest, deep, where you'll warm as the forest reminds you of its fragrant embrace. Suddenly, you are surprised by a purple jack-in-the-box waiting to be wound. Strains of Pop Goes the Weasel sound with each turn of the handle. Then, out pops the killer clown, the hungry clown, to surprise you. Down its throat you go. Whatever you do, just don't break the rules. Unless you're in tune, you might possibly never return. Yeah, this world is terrifying. If there's one thing from this game that absolutely scarred me as a child, it has to be the quote-unquote killer clown. I'm not one of those kids that was scared of clowns. I'm not scared of clowns to this day. But I am specifically scared of the jack-in-the-box in this game. That's how you get into Eddie's world. What is going on? Eddie, what are you doing? Eddie is the bass player for the band, and according to the manual, his main concern is the importance of fun. You better have fun, or else. I guess that makes sense why it's in a jack-in-the-box, but for me, as a child, and even still to this day, turning the handle on this jack-in-the-box is not fun. It's just awful. It's just bad. And now I'm going to subject you to the experience as well. So if you have an intense phobia of clowns, I recommend skipping ahead like a minute, because you're not going to want to see this. This is so much worse than most clowns I've seen. Yep, I hate it so much. I think for some reason, the fact that it's low resolution somehow makes it scarier than if it were in HD. I don't know how to explain that concept, but I firmly stand by it. Anyway, once you go down the throat of this absolute demon, you land on a giant bass guitar, where you have to then locate a ticket. That ticket is for a subway that you can ride on. There are 5 different destinations you can select from on this little map. The 4th location is a bar, a place that I guess in Eddie's mind is very much associated with fun. And seeing as his value is fun, of course that's where the totem piece would be hidden. This bar is also filled to the brim with different sports references. You can click on a football and have a bunch of shadow demons attack you. You can also find a man playing golf on top of a table, and then he falls over and vanishes into nothingness. And then at the bar itself, the bartender is a baseball player. And once he vanishes from sight, you can go up to the bar, click on some of the glasses in the background, and then a bottle will be poured out to reveal that the totem piece was somehow in that bottle. This one makes the least sense. But then again, this entire game is so bizarre that I really can't, like, that doesn't even stand out that much to me. It's like, yeah, okay, totem came out of a bottle. I'm not fazed. And that's it. That's the final totem piece. This is where the end of the game is triggered. But I'm going to dial it back a little bit and show you the rest of Eddie's world, just so you know how many weird and creepy things are in it. For one, there's an art gallery you can visit, filled with terrifying images that are apparently by Nick Kiefer and Doug Rhodes. Nick Kiefer and Doug Rhodes are people who helped with the forest, Eddie's world, and Chris's world in this game. They helped come up with the concept and design. You can also find a special painting at the back of the art gallery, which shows a pristine view, and it says the American Dream. Then you can put your hand on this little panel, and the entire place blows up. Anyway, you can also go back to the subway, and instead of clicking on the map, you can click on this thing, which says brake for an emergency. Now there is no emergency, so therefore you shouldn't click on it. But let's say you do. What happens? A very sad and disturbing sound plays. And then you're met with a message. This is now a bass that is out of tune and counting down to a meltdown. To save the day, test your ear by returning the strings to their correct pitch. To get there, first take the subway to the, whatever that is, psychedelic puzzle and match animations to symbol. I feel like there was some sort of a typo there. What they want you to do is go to the very first stop on the map, where you will find an elevator. You then have to watch a bunch of weird animations with secret symbols hidden inside of them. The elevator will become operational. You can take it to the top floor and find the tuning pegs for the giant bass guitar you're on. I remember having trouble with this puzzle when I was young, but this might be the second easiest puzzle in the game. All you have to do is click on each of the tuning pegs for the bass guitar. If you hear a sound that doesn't sound horribly warped, good. If you hear a sound that does sound horribly warped, click on it again until you stop hearing that. And then you win. You've saved the day. And that leaves only one thing left in Eddie's world, which is a talk show, which you can attend, and Eddie will say a bunch of random junk, half of which is not true.
Check out Michael's Playhouse. Might just lead you into Scotty's little jello thing. And don't forget to hunt for the spaghetti bush in Chris's world. Very significant. And certainly, whatever you do, don't forget to look most carefully for Geoff's rowboat of doom.
And that's pretty much it, not only for Eddie's world, but for the entire game. So let's see what happens when you collect the final totem.
Well, it seems you've finally put it all together to bring us together.
Yeah, it's about time.
So if you're ready, guys, shall we? Chris?
And I don't know where I'll be going.
We'd like to thank you for your successful visit to our promised land, for finding your way through a little adversity here and there. But more importantly, we'd like to thank you for joining us and asking the bigger question. What is the promised land? A question to which you may have discovered you've had the answer to all along. If you haven't, well, see you on the inside.
And there we go. We have finished the game. We found all the totem pieces. There's not really anything left to do. So I ask you, are you like me? Do you now believe this to be one of the strangest video games ever made? And if not, tell me what you do think is one of the strangest video games of all time in the comments below. Queensryche Promised Land. It's terrifying. It's bizarre. Some of the puzzles are whack. Some of the hiding places are whack. But it remains one of my favorite games of all time. I love this thing. I'm going to be 80 years old still pulling this thing out and finding more faces on trees. At the touch of a button, you're miles away. Enter Promised Land, and you may never wish to leave. Thank you for watching.
Send off.